The landmark U.S. Supreme Court case known as Brown versus the Board of Education ruled that the state-sanctioned segregation of public schools was unconstitutional. And that was back in 1954. So you would think that 70 years later, American public schools would be a lot less segregated, right? Not really. According to a report by the U.S. Government Accountability Office released in 2022, more than a third of students currently attend a school that is predominantly the same race and ethnicity. And between the years 1991 and 2000, segregation on the basis of race actually increased in public schools, while between 2000 and 2020, it largely remained unchanged. So why hasn't racial segregation in public schools ended even though it's been outlawed? A lot of this may deal with redlining. Redlining started in the 1930s under the New Deal, and it was the practice of banks in the U.S. denying mortgages to black people and people of color, preventing them from buying homes in specific neighborhoods. The federal government would release these maps that would show lenders which neighborhoods were safe to lend to and which ones were not. Green districts were considered safe, while red districts were considered too risky to lend to. It just so happened that black neighborhoods were always colored red. This practice blocked African Americans from being able to buy homes for decades. Although housing discrimination on the basis of race was outlawed in 1968, the damage was already done. Now, current school districts are mostly drawn along the same lines as red line neighborhoods were. And because public schools tend to be divided among the lines of race, this heavily affects school funding. On average, predominantly non-white school districts receive about $23 billion less in funding than majority white school districts receive, despite the districts serving roughly the same amount of students. So people tend to think that public school segregation ended in the 1950s and 60s, but it didn't. And the loopholes that school districts use to continue and in some cases increase segregation in schools are just creating larger gaps in the quality of education that black and brown students receive in this country.